Hey guys, Blue Ryan Tiger here. If you're watching this video, you're probably on the tail end of the first spooky story video I uploaded for this Halloween season. This one is a different direction than a bunch of comments I found on various online sources like Reddit. This is my own stories that I've heard with my own 2 ears, secondhand from other people, and will be told in a more open format, have a drink in hand kind of way without really a script to go off of. Except one, which did get documented a bit, and is sort of a Big Tamale special feature for this episode. So, aside from that one, sit back and enjoy, and thanks for sticking around. Well, to start things off, my first story comes from a cousin I know. We're not very close now, but we were a lot closer in the past, namely because he lived a lot closer to me, and we were about the same age. He is actually interested in the paranormal. Unlike me, he was always wanting to go visit sites and hauntings and stuff. Honestly, that stuff does scare me, so I've never honestly actually engaged in it. I think he has, to a point, which you'll see that I talk about. There's three different things I've heard from him. Two of them I was witness to in person when I was a kid. In fact, all of these incidents were probably within a couple of years of each other. I'd say these are about all 1995, so probably I would have been 11. No, 9 years old. I would have been 9. He would have been about 10 years old. The first was what I call the paper incident. He resided in an apartment in Randolph, New Jersey at the time. My family had my mom's mom and some of her sisters living up in the same apartment complex, actually. And now and then when we would visit them from Tennessee, this cousin would come over and visit. And he would always be on the weird stuff. But one afternoon he came to visit. It was sunny. I still remember that day kind of vividly. But at the time, our parents were Indians, they were strict, so we didn't get to play video games. We didn't play with toys, that kind of stuff. So it was basically to sit around and do nothing, essentially. We couldn't even draw to a point. However, he had gotten a piece of paper, and he had started to draw some weird symbols on it. I don't really recall what he drew on it, but he drew some numbers and things. And he folded this paper up, and he told me, "Look at this." Now, in the apartment, there was a closet, like a coat closet in the corner, and it had an unlockable door. It didn't have a lock on it. And he was sticking this folded piece of paper into the, under the door. Then, like a minute later, he started tugging on it, and he's like, "I can't get it out, tug on it." And I barely tug on it, and it was like something was holding it there. Now, I didn't think of anything at the time. I'm like, oh, this kid's playing a trick. Okay. But now that I think of it with my older self, I do think he was fooling around with something, and something was holding onto that paper. I do know there was numbers. You did have to write a equation, but that's all I recall, really. It was something he picked up from the kids at school. It was real weird. The second and third incident was he moved to Tennessee a year later. And while he was riding around, we had another set of cousins. They're all doctor crowd now. I actually haven't talked to some of them in several years now. But all four of us were around the place one day, and he was telling us that how he heard a kid at his school tell him that his dad used to work in a bar and apparently the bar was haunted. I'm not sure whereabouts in New Jersey this was, but the dad went to the bathroom because he really needed to go to the bathroom, and he was left to close the bar up. And when he came back out of the bathroom, all the chairs and the stools were upside down on the table of the bar. Um, from my point of view now, that seems a little doable, but I always was on the sense that it was some type of passed down creepypasta, kind of like those chain link mails that they send. Chain mails, that's what it is. And it wasn't exactly a true story. Still, it was morbidly interesting that he knew that. The third story that I witnessed to, was at his place. They kind of had an open house for everyone that lived in Tennessee that was family. And we all came, and these two cousins were here, and another one I'll call Danny. And you gotta understand these cousin dynamics. When these guys got together, I was technically not allowed to run around with all of them. So this is part of the reason I did not experience this. And it may have been my saving grace too. But telling us that something was going on in a room. Now he had a bedroom, and right next to his bedroom was another bedroom on the other side, and it was mirror basically the mirror dimensions and size, mirror floor plan. So if there was a closet on the right hand wall, there was a closet on the left hand side, basically. And he kept trying to show us what was in there. Now, I think this is more of not so much me play with them, but my dad was like, don't run around these people's houses, it's rude. So I unfortunately didn't get to go around in their investigation. But this spare bedroom was being used as a sort of storage room, basically, because he was an only kid. And there were some gas grills and stuff that was in there. And garbage bags, extra clothes, that kind of stuff. And so I had to sit with my dad while all the grown-ups carried on about all this stuff. And I just see them going around with flashlights and creeping all sorts of things. And while I'm sitting there, there's this very loud metallic clang that sounded from the room. And everybody comes running out of that room. All the cousins. And a couple of the cousins were yelling. They were going to start yelling at me that I caused this, but since I'm sitting here, that's obviously not possible. But I think Danny got in trouble with his dad for causing trouble. But from what I understood later, that I was able to talk, they were looking around, and he kept saying that something was moving in the room. And something banged really loud on a gas grill that was sitting in this storage room, particularly on the propane tank. And none of the kids were near it, from what I understand. And that's as far as I know. I don't think anybody really remembers this anymore, or have any other details in it, and I don't think it's something I can actually bring up with him now, but those are my experiences with that cousin. I do believe he had been around some of those stuff to experience it, and I subsequently witnessed some of that. So this next story comes from another cousin. I do know him very well, was actually in his wedding ceremony. He's my younger cousin of 6 years, but he's works in the medical field. One night he was telling my family of a ghost story that he saw at his workplace. Now, in the hospitals, they have a call light that is over the hospital room door so the nurse can see it and go in. And they had a wing that they remodeled. All these hospital rooms were remodeled into offices and those kind of spaces. And him and his two coworkers were walking around this late night. He didn't say how late. And ironically, they were in this remodeled wing. And one of his coworkers said, "Hey, wouldn't it just be really weird if this building was haunted?" And as soon as they said that, this call light over an office door went on. And he said all three of them stared at it and booked it back out of the wing. And later he told me that that office where that light went off was actually an operating room. So he believes that was paranormal activity based on their conversation. And he actually says he thinks that someone died there. So who knows? The other story I heard from him was actually recently, just before he did get married. His parents moved. They don't live in Tennessee anymore. And he went to go check over the house, I guess for old time's sake, and to make sure he didn't leave anything behind. And he was the only one on the property. And it was pretty much Nickelback's Photograph song with him, what he described, looking over everything. Him spending his entire life there growing up. And he saw that, everything is clean and empty, and he's like, "I've never seen the house like this before." And he says as he's going out the door to, like, goodbye, he hears someone cough in the house. He says, "I could have sworn someone coughed." So he pauses, and he looks around the house one last time, and he doesn't see anything. But after that, he just said he just left, and he didn't bother anymore. So, and he said he thought the house was haunted. I tried to press him to see if anything else happened in the house, but he said that's the only thing that he's ever heard or experienced in the place. So, who knows? This couple of bits were stuff I heard and kind of saw at ETSU when I was going to school. The first one was a girl I knew. Her name was Danielle. She acted in my short film for Motion Tools Tree. But one night when she was over with my crew getting ready to do this movie, she was talking about haunted spots in Bristol. And she was claiming she lived in a farmhouse in Bristol with her brother and her parents. And she says now and then they would always hear a set of footsteps that would just walk through the front door and come into the kitchen there and just stop. And she said it was very unnerving. I don't think she would make up that kind of stuff. She was fairly honest to me. But she was the only person that told me directly of an experience they had. My cousin, who was attending ETSU at the time, had a girlfriend, and she would tell me stuff, but it was just the old legends of ETSU being haunted, basically. It wasn't really like substantial or firsthand. However, there is a very prominent building on the campus called Gilbriet Hall. Actually, I think it's the second oldest building on the ETSU campus. It was made in the early 1900s, and it was made after Sid Gilbriet, one of the administrators of the school at the time. Now, there's a lot of legends around the building, but basically it boils down to you do see ghosts of people, doors locked before it rains, and power failures and stuff. And there's the power failure thing has always been an issue because even though the wiring has been updated and upgraded, the lights will always flicker inexplicably for no reason. And I saw this one day. It was spring of 2011. It was in my second intro to Japanese class with my teacher, and she was organizing her papers. I was in my normal seat. It was a very, it was almost a summer, I believe, because the windows were open. There was these very grand windows on the second floor, and the classroom opened. The classroom windows opened out very beautifully, and um, she contemplated about putting the lights off because it looked nice outside. But as she's stacking her papers, the lights flickered, and I got a twinge inside of me that this wasn't normal. And it didn't help that right after the lights flickered, she looked up. She's usually not phased when stuff happens, and to see her look up and just like study this thing, like what the heck happened, it did make you like, oh, it's that thing. By then I was aware of the building's reputation, and also that the lights would flicker on and off like that. I never saw anything else like that, but I've always heard from other students of them experiencing that frequently. Also, on this note, I do see this in passing, and I'll just put it out in the public space to clear it up. There's always a legend that goes around that a group of students went into the theater of that building. It's called the Bud Frank Theater, and they were drunk one night, and the lights were on when he went in, and they tried to turn it off, but they couldn't, and it was in a way that made it that it was not physically possible. And when they apparently started saying, "Oh, if this building is haunted, if you're the ghost, blink twice or something," and the lights started blinking, and so they started apparently asking this light questions for almost an hour, but they never asked why the ghost was there, and but they said it was the Gilbreth guy. Apparently he does still sit there according to legend. But I see this copy pasted around quite a bit, and it often gets deleted. But apparently the source of it is a website from a guy who was in that group when it happened in 2010. So supposedly it's true, and that's the origins of that, in case you ever wonder if you see that go around. After the one with the light, I'd say it was still comfortable going to the building. I would say it was eerie, but I never really expected. I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a freak thing. That's not really real. And I always heard it happened on the other floors. And usually I was with someone at the time, so it was a well-trafficked building. If I ever hear anything else, though, I'll be glad to do a follow-up video. But for my experiences at DTSU, and from what I heard from other people, that's all I've heard. Okay, this one, I do have to keep it anonymous to a point, but I can at least tell you what happened. I heard this secondhand a couple years back after I got laid off, probably about 2017 in the near winter months, like November. And apparently someone at a place came to a relative and they were asking for help or advice, and they said their place was haunted. Her and her husband with a kid, it's a boy, he was maybe about 8 years old or something. Probably younger, but he was a very young kid, but he was like cognitive to read and write and that kind of stuff. They moved into a apartment out in towards Kingsport or something, and the mom always felt unrest in the apartment, and the kid started complaining to his mom that he kept seeing a man in a hat in his room, and his mom kind of like started to dig into what's really going on here. This is creepy and she found out that there apparently the floor above her was haunted. And what was going on? There was a couple other things that was going on, and what happened? The kid was getting scratched, and she would hear furniture move around on the top floor. Now these were single floor apartments, but they were stacked on top of each other in a more modern fashion. And she learned that a guy died on the property, and she started thinking that this guy was doing something to her kid. So she started to stay at her grandparents' place, and her husband was apparently not phased by this and thought it was stupid. Um, but apparently he took the kid back there one day, saying, "Oh yeah, your mama's being stupid or whatever," and he came back really distraught, the kid. So it's like to the point of marital fights that don't touch the kid, don't take it back there, or stop being an idiot kind of thing. But she tried to figure out what happened with the top spot. She had called a priest and stuff. They did visit the place. I don't know what happened afterwards, but apparently, from what I know, this is hearsay. It's not 100% sure. Nobody was really living in the top floor, but a girl that was living there, it was supposedly a girl, had a brother that was living overseas, being deployed, and she made a deal, the devil, that bring my brother back alive from the war zone. And he did come back, but the very night he came back onto American soil, he died. They don't imply what happened, they just said he died. And so they definitely were like, we're gonna move someplace else and send a priest over there. And that's the last I heard of that one. That one was actually creepy because, you know, it was not just paranormal, it was more evil entities. And that's actually the reason I don't like going to do ghost huntings, really. Because sometimes you don't know if it's an evil thing you're dealing with or not. And it's actually, that's what creeps me out, actually. And that's why when I write the horror I write, it's usually more of a, you can possibly explain it with science fiction to a point, or it's more of just general creepypasta. There's some things you don't mess with, or you happen to get involved with. It's not a good thing to get tangled up into. So I keep a whiteboard of that on purpose. And you kind of, it's something I don't want to go into, but my dad has had stories of seeing this stuff happen, of evil things, and, you know, I believe in God, and I do trust him to protect me from those kind of stuff, but that doesn't, I don't willingly put myself in danger, so to speak. So that's why when I hear ghost hunts and that kind of stuff, I actually don't engage in those type of activities. Okay, now for the story that you guys all have been waiting for, that's pretty big. I had this typed out a while on Reddit, so I'll mostly be referencing and reading that and interjecting my own details. Now, what makes this story special? Well, why don't you find out? I refer to this series of events called the Arden Road Incident, and it's called such because that's where the incident took place. So, let's not start at the beginning, shall we? It's early 80s. My dad came over to the United States. Some of his other family was living here already. His eldest brother was a millionaire, and he basically helped this brother as a caretaker, more or less. And while he was doing that, he had to do stuff like feed the dog, solder pipes, fix cars, that sort of thing. But the brother moved houses, and he eventually came to this property that was on Arden Road. It's an H-shaped house. It's very hacienda kind of Spanish styled, that kind of architecture. But there was always seems to be always something off-putting about it. I'll start referring to my Reddit posts from this point on, as it's more put together properly. My dad was at the house most of the time. A few times he had spent the night as well. Emphasis on a few. The stuff always got weird when he did. One particular night, the brother's father-in-law was at the house along with my dad. They were just there at the house as the brother's wife. I don't know if they had their kids then, it's not clear to me. But there was a guest room and the father-in-law stayed there with my dad on the couch. My dad couldn't sleep. He was restless and barely got any rest. However, the next morning, the father-in-law came up to him and said, "I don't know about you, but I won't be staying at this house again." Outside of my post, apparently this happened to one other person that I found later, an in-law too, but I'm not sure who and what the outcome was. Back to the post. Another time my dad was doing some work in the yard and cleaning up their basement. They had a den on the bottom floor along with a fireplace. He had just did a ton of work and decided to take a nap on the basement floor for a few minutes. He described that he had a surreal dream that he could see what was going on in the room at the current time despite him sleeping. Just at this point, this gnarled figure emerged from the fireplace down the chimney, laughing at him. He described it as looking like Rumpelstiltskin. He woke up with a start but didn't see anything. It was afterwards that he had stopped sleeping at the house. My dad also remarked that his brother had a medium, a clairvoyant kind of friend, that would visit the family regularly. One odd thing he mentioned was that the medium said she made a friend for the brother's daughter, and frequently that the girl, which would be the daughter, would stand facing a wall corner, like if you put them in timeout, whispering or talking as if she was conversing with someone. Along that same vein, my dad's sister related an experience at the same house. She had stopped over for lunch and was sitting with the clairvoyant at a dining table. All of a sudden, a chandelier over the table started to swing wildly side to side. The sister was alarmed at this, just staring at the swinging chandelier as there was no possible way for it to be doing that. The clairvoyant looked up at the chandelier and said, "Oh, don't worry about that. That's just some of my friends." That's the extent of the stories from that house. It always spooked my dad. He did say it's weird. He's genuinely scared about what happened. But no, you knew something was really wrong at the house. Outside of my post, apparently my mom visited it once or twice when they were moving out of the location, and she said it always felt like there was a heavy negative presence, and I think she's a little bit more sensitive to that kind of stuff, but she just said something was wrong with the place. So that ends that arc. I posted this on Reddit in 2015 because I was like, this is a very interesting story, and a lot of people mocked me for it, but a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't think this could happen in New Jersey, in this community, Denville." But what made it interesting is what happened 5 years later. So One day I was randomly searching my name on the internet, per usual, and I found out that someone made a Reddit post mentioning me in it. And apparently, what happened is my story got some notoriety with people living in that town of New Jersey. And someone apparently visited that house and had an experience. So, what I'll be doing now is reading that post that they left on r/paranormal encounters. This was posted in January of 2020, and the reason I didn't find out about it till later was because they didn't tag my name right. Otherwise, I would have definitely been on top of it. So, here we go. And they call it the Arden Road Horror by You Gemini High. This past summer, I had the misfortune of having to perform pool service work at the H-shaped house that overlooks Arden Road in Denville, New Jersey. After relaying my experiences to a friend about this place, she sent me a link to the sub, and from a few years back, I'm confident both the OP and I are referring to the same house. Here is the original post from Redditor Blue Orion Tiger, and it links to my post that I read to you a couple minutes ago. Heads up, this is a bit long, but it is all true and to the best of my recollection. It is an overcast day in late June 2019. My co-worker and I arrive at the Arden Road house before 1 p.m. The home is not typical for this area, in that it's kind of built in a Fox Spanish Mission hacienda style you see a lot in Florida. It looks faded and dirty, a bit dirty, as though it dingy shadows permanently cast on the exterior. The interior of the house was cast in the same dirty shadow, but no lights were on. The property is teeming with activity though. Contractors, landscapers, and plumbers are hard at work, getting the house ready for the new tenants to move in. Immediately there was a sense of hostility emanating from all around. Some of the contractors stared us down, others wouldn't make eye contact at all. No one was smiling or laughing. In fact, they spoke barely audibly to one another. Right off the bat, we were on edge. It felt like we had to keep an eye on our tools, but we had a long day ahead of us, so we headed towards the pool. It was in an in-ground pool with a side spa that had been sitting full and fitted for a few years, covered only by a child's safety net, not an actual pool cover. It was green and full of leaves as could be. We began by hauling a 2 and 3 horsepower pump the 400 feet to the pool, followed by the intake hoses, discharge hoses, then the power washer. It was my job to attach the hoses and find a spot to discharge the water out of the pool. The property's backyard ends in woods, a rock wall, and these small stone mounds, about 5 of them. As I approach the mounds, I get a bad feeling in my stomach. It felt like they had much bigger at one time but had been deliberately scattered. I got the feeling I was on desecrated ground, and pumping water there was a really bad idea. I opted to put the hose in a small creek bed instead. As we began to drain, the new owner showed up and actually helped us the whole time with the job, and what a dirty and exhausting job it was. Every pump we had, both gas-powered and small electric one for the spa, failed. The electrical outlets on the exterior and even interior of the house we would use would fail. One gas pump would finally start to work, then the other would die. The drain process should have taken no more than 25 to 35 minutes. It ended up taking hours. When it was finally time to power to wash the pool, the drawstring on the power washer broke and we had to tie string around the starting mechanism to get it going. The power washer too would intermittently die or out or not perform normally. The homeowner threw up his hands in the air at one point and to say, "What the hell is going on with your equipment?" I told him half-jokingly that his new home was built on an Indian burial ground and he should take a look at the scattered round rock mounds in the back. He gave me a look of total dismissal and mild annoyance. At one point I had to get something out of the truck when a gentle giant of a plumber approached me and asked me if I had any small pieces of PVC to spare. I gave him some and told him of the problems we were having. He went from joking and affable to dead serious when he said, "Brother, I've been here for 2 days now and I don't want to ever come back here. Something ain't right here, and everything is going wrong for us too. One thing after another. Stuff breaking left and right." Unequivocally, this was the hardest, most taxing, backbreaking, and longest day of work I have ever had to endure. My coworker said as much, and he had been in this industry since he was 15. The frustration with the failing equipment was the worst part. It was like the place was cursed, because the pumps and power washers were top of the line and months old. We didn't leave until 8 p.m. and were reamed out for costing our boss money in lost time. It was miserable. The owner thanked us and tipped us well and sent us on our way. On our way home, we talked about how many things went so wrong that day for no good reason. Now, it is late July, and the homeowner and his family moved in. They have left for vacation, though, and want their pool clean for when they come back. I and a different coworker show up around 1. It's just us on the scene this time, no one else around. The weather was identical to the first visit, overcast and muggy. As we wheel our vacuum cart past the house, we both stopped dead in our tracks. My hairs raised and I felt like we were not being watched, but being leered at by the most sinister force I have ever felt. Imagine a psychotic murderer in a supermax prison, menacing any guard that passes by their cell. My coworker, let's call him Ryan, quickly piped up, "Do you feel that, bro?" I said and absolutely did. Ryan was an extremely polite, well-mannered, and intelligent young man, but suffered from bad anxiety on a daily basis. Within minutes of arriving on the property, he was barely able to function. Whatever was inside this house was getting inside and on top of Ryan's mind. He would try to start setting equipment up and then freeze and just stare at the house. There was legitimate tears in his eyes 15 minutes on. He was terrified, and it was no mystery as to why. I was getting angrier and angrier by the minute. Not at Ryan, but whatever malicious entity was toying with us. We began to see shadows flutter and job about inside the house. At one point, we heard a muted but audible thud inside, only to see the chandelier in the main room ever so slightly swaying, spinning, and it was just ever so slightly tapped by a hand. We pushed on, and I had Ryan vacuuming the pool, with his back turned to the house. I tested the water and did my other tasks, intermittently stopping to take pics of the house in hopes of capturing anything. No luck with that. Ryan was very methodical and efficient when he cleaned the pool. He was a bit of a perfectionist. This day when he looked at me with a countenance I have only seen in the pictures of Holocaust survivors and whimpered, "Can we please get out of here as soon as possible?" I could barely recognize him. We did what we had to do and rushed cleaning up and putting things away. I was walking to our truck, past the side of the house that has basement windows. The windows were screened and the basement was so close to pitch black with only very little sun coming in for light. But amid the darkness, the figure so much more black and solid than anything else clearly stood out. It was a human form, but that was crouching on the balls of its feet, swaying and bouncing up and down, just a little bit. I stopped several times. Oh, hang on. Yeah, I stopped several times and made sure it wasn't my reflection or an optical illusion. Anytime I moved this thing, which changed positions, like jump to another window or track follow me, it was evident to me that it was playing a game of I'm over here, now I'm over here type game. It finally stood up at one point and waved at me. As dark as it was, I could tell it was giving me a smile made of pure evil and hatred. I finally lost it and yelled, "What the blank do you want from us? This isn't your house anymore, get over it." It didn't stop. On the walk back to the pool from my truck to collect more equipment, it did the same thing but with more intensity. This time its movements were faster and more menacing. It was making it known that it was faster than any person. In the OP, the entity was described as being a Rumpelstiltskin creature that came down a chimney and laughed in the caretaker's face, albeit in his dream that felt more real than real. That's not a bad description of what I experienced. A malicious, deformed humanoid figure that lives to toy with people. We finally packed everything up and got the heck out of there. It is an experience I will never forget, but for some reason I would like to go back and confront it again. Some of my earliest memories involved intense encounters with shadow people, but nothing was as blatant, in your face, and outright demonic as this encounter. Thank you for reading and checking your input. Oh, and since you made it so far, the actual address is 19 Arden Road, Denville, New Jersey. Check out how many previous owners it had over the years, often changing hands in a matter of months. So, when I read that, I definitely shared it with my parents, who found it very interesting. For one, they always thought there was something wrong with the house, but they didn't know it was like that bad wrong. And then they also said that it would explain, they wondered if it like actually did something to people in the house, like it altered their behavior. But it was a very odd experience. The funny thing is, I mentioned Ghost Adventures earlier, and apparently somebody in the comments said they sent this link to the house to him, so I'll be totally blown off my feet if it actually gets investigated. But that brings this tale to an end because it's funny. My dad saw this happen in the 80s. You related to me in the 2000s, and we just left it as that. It's like this happened in the past, and that's gone. We had no idea this thing was still going on. It's kind of like those secrets the Templars found out about decades later. And though we don't want anything to do with it, and we're gone, it's interesting that it's kind of like a sort of a closure of the saga, so to speak. Because sometimes my dad thought it scared him, but you didn't know if it was like a real thing. But after hearing that, he knew that was a real something that was there. And I think that helped him realize that something was wrong at the place. So, that's my big story. Thank you for listening to all of that. And hopefully it spooks you to a point. Because it certainly did. Just me reading it by itself. So, I hope you guys enjoy this. And if you want to hear more stuff of this sort, drop a comment, let me know. Whether it's the Reddit readings or stuff. Unfortunately, that was pretty much all of my life-hand experiences, so there's not really much more to tell in that regard. But if you like the format of stuff, let me know, and I'll see if I can do something about that. But have fun, and I'll catch you later. Bye.